What has it called forth in you specifically?
It's almost like I'm a different person.
How has it changed you?
It's forced me to be significantly more responsible and more intentional with my time. I don't have time to, watch X amount of hockey games a week. X being, insert whatever number you want over 5. And I say 5, but really I mean like 1 caveat. I love spending time with my son. Like that's true. But also sometimes I don't want to play blocks. Like, frankly, it is just the right thing to do because my life is even less about me now.
So welcome to Restless. I'm your host, Father Joseph Gill, along with Matt and Ranae. You've seen Matt around. And Ranae, have we done an episode with you? I can't remember.
We did one. Just one, right?
Yeah, we did one. It was your
My
conversion story.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Which was an awesome story. And since that episode, a few things have happened in your life. So if people who are watching or listening don't know, Matt and Ranae are married.
That's true. Right.
Which I'm not sure that you were when you did the episode, to be honest. I think you were still dating.
I don't know if we were.
Yeah, we
either were just married or about to get married.
Somewhere right around there, yeah.
Yeah.
But also, Ranae and Matt have one child.
Yeah.
He contributed part of it, I suppose. And she is expecting her second to be born, God willing, May 2025. Correct? May, right? June, July?
Yep.
May. Okay, yeah.
May.
Yeah.
You got it.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. So that's kind of a big lifestyle shift when you have your first child, is it not?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That might be the understatement of the century.
Yeah, definitely changes everything. In a good way. In a good way, certainly.
Good. And we'll get into that. But I want to give some context to our listeners about kind of what's kind of been on my heart that prompted part of this episode is, we're seeing more and more across the board that birth rates are declining in most developed countries. And even in America, the birth rate is now below replacement rate, which is kind of scary. It's the first time in human history that so much of the world is refusing to have kids or unable. But I think for the most part, it is a choice.
Yeah.
Really, there's only I only think it was like 10 or 15 countries left out of 190 that still have birth rates above replacement rate. And most of those are in Asia or in Africa. So it's kind of a scary world that we're entering into. And I think a lot of young adults are feeling that of like, it's a big change. I don't know if we should bring kids into this world, which is messed up, and who knows about the environment and the economy and this and that. And I'm sure those thoughts probably crossed your mind, right? I mean, it's tough to make a living, especially here in Connecticut, and raise a family on the salary that you can get. But I just want to kind of do this episode to talk about why parenting is not as scary as you think it might be. But also like the joys of it too. And I think that's such an important thing. So if you had to tell me kind of what in your life was some of the more drastic changes that came about because of being parents, what is it? What was your experience? Open-ended question for you.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
I mean, I think it just, the biggest change is just like your priorities shift so drastically, so immediately, because this little person is placed in your arms, and now, like, I just remember looking at saying, like, I love him so much. I don't know, like, I've never felt this kind of love before. I feel like my heart is exploding, and then you just want to make sure that everything you do is to take care of him and to make sure that he's growing and learning and so I think it's just a huge priority shift, because whereas before, I mean, Matt and I are obviously looking out for one another and caring for one another, but it's a different thing because we're not dependent upon each other,
right?
Exactly,
like a child is. So it shifts from worrying. You just become more selfless. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely experienced. So, like, let's say that I matured at a 1% rate for the first 25 years of my life.
That's pretty generous.
Yeah. But all of a sudden it's, we had a kid, and it was like, again, overnight, right? So I think to that extent, right, like, becoming a parent is scary, right? Because any kind of growth and any kind of change has some kind of daunting element to it,
Mm.
usually. You know what I mean? I feel like that's fair to say. When you go to college, you might be nervous about it. When you enter into the workforce, you might be nervous about it. But again, it's that's very. I don't mean it in a negative way when I say egocentric. I just mean like that's very focused on yourself, whereas this is something that is intrinsically focused on the other.
Well, there's a
And
lot more at stake now, right? I mean,
oh,
if you fail out of college your first semester, oh well, no big deal. But if you fail to raise like your child doesn't eat for 3 weeks, okay,
right,
Yeah.
that's a big fail. That's a big
right.
much.
And the truth is that it doesn't have to be exclusively uh in regard to physical needs, although obviously that's important. But as the father and head of the household, I definitely feel the weight of I have to make sure my children are raised in the faith and are taught how to pray, and know that Jesus Christ is fully present in the Eucharist, and know what what's virtue and what's vice and what's sin and what how to make a proper confession, and so like we become the primary educators as well, and so there's definitely something daunting there.
Yeah, you think you're
But of
really starting with
course,
a blank slate. And this kid knows
yeah,
literally nothing about anything in the entire
yes,
world, and you have to
yes,
bring him up to
yes,
speed
and it often
in
feels like
18
I
years.
also know nothing about anything.
Mm, mm. Did you
And then
feel like
I'm
you were
also figuring it out.
well, did you feel like you were ready for being parents? Like, did you have like the knowledge, both practical and spiritual, or was it like you're just like winging this by the seat of your pants?
I mean, I don't think was like, I am totally prepared. I've got this. Like, I
Yeah.
think because there are so many unknowns and so many things that you really don't think about until, you're expecting your first, and then you're like, oh, I need, you know, 8,000 things that I didn't know existed before. But um, I feel like at least for me, I grew up like loving kids and taking care of kids and just being around children. So
Renee, do you have younger siblings?
I don't have, I have one older
Mm,
brother. But I always loved to babysit, and it was
okay.
just, yeah.
So you had
Um,
some practice, and
yeah,
Matt, I know
yeah.
you have cousins, right, that were a lot
Yeah.
younger than you. That
And
Yeah.
nieces and nephews. And
Yeah.
so I felt like I felt to a certain extent I felt prepared in just caring for a baby. Um, and then I think just instinct also just kind of kicks in.
Yeah.
mm. It's
For
wonderful
moms
how
at least.
God wrote that on our hearts, the instinct piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And I think you can be like bombarded, especially, if you're on social media, and just you can be bombarded with all of the information, and you can start to feel loaded down by things that, you know, you think you need to worry about, but then when the baby comes, it's like things just happen naturally, and
Mhm.
you have your spouse there to support you, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, yeah.
Do you find in your own heart and mind like a worry about, oh, I wonder if I'm good enough, or I don't
Oh,
feel
100%.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to take it?
No, go ahead. You can go.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely experienced that. But again, I think it's just because it's a big deal, which is like, again, the understatement of the century. Raising a child is a big deal. Um, but I do want to say that there is a pro to uh overcoming challenges, right? So like raising a child is a huge challenge, but you do in fact grow a ton. So like I can't even it's I mean I look back at myself not only previous to marriage, but previous to being born, and
Mm.
it's almost like I'm a different person. So
What has it called forth in you specifically? How has it changed you?
yeah, it is forced me to be I think
Wow,
it
to
has
stump
forced me
Matt Sparaza, that's something.
yeah, it's
It's
forced
not
me
often he's speechless.
yeah, yeah. It's forced me to be significantly more responsible.
Mm.
Um and to more intentional with my time. Like I don't have time to watch X amount of hockey games a week. X being, insert whatever number you want over 5. And and like I really don't. I just don't have time for that now. And I say 5, but really I mean like 1, you know?
Mhm.
Um and it has forced me to. It's funny, Joe made a comment on a previous episode. I don't remember exactly which one. Uh but he was talking about how spending time with his grandma was something he did because it's the right thing to do, you know?
Mm.
I think there is an approach there with being a dad as well, which is like, okay, caveat. I love spending time with my son, like that's true. But also sometimes I don't want to play blocks, and
Really? That's not the funnest thing in the entire world?
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which isn't to say that there aren't times where I do want to play blocks. I do, but it is like, frankly, it is just the right thing to do because my life is even less about me now. I mean, I guess in a way it was never about me,
Mm.
right? Like that's Bishop Barron. Your life isn't about you. Um,
And that's what any good vocation, whether it is priesthood, marriage, or single
right,
life, should call forth from you, is that it's a mission to give oneself away.
right. And so I guess that's what I mean when I say responsibility and maturation. It's that I have been forced to die to myself. Um,
And what a
but
total
I've welcomed it, Forced might sound as if someone's pushing me off a cliff.
but that's the beautiful key, and that's I think why a lot of young people are not having kids, even if they are getting married or not getting married, because you're willing to embrace that daily death, and it's hard
Mhm.
because you're giving up a lot of things. I'm sure you can't go on all the vacations you want. You don't have the time just to pick up and like, hey, let's go out to dinner tonight. Like, no, you have to really consider, or what is this young human being going to need? And
Yeah, I mean, we we
what's
definitely don't go on every vacation we want.
what are some of the stuff? What are some of the things that you have given up for this greater good?
I mean, I
Sleep.
think just yeah, sleep. Sleep, I think just like leisure time, like I don't and I think it's important for parents to still find time to do things that they enjoy.
Mm.
Um and to take care of themselves as well. But like I used to go on a run pretty much every day, and now
Yeah,
I don't do that.
Mm.
Or I used to I don't know, they're just or like, even just reading um for fun. Like you have to you just like Matt said, you have to be really intentional with your time,
mhm.
whereas
Hmm.
before I feel like we kind of on a Saturday it was like, what do you want to do? We could just go do something, I don't know,
Mhm.
Pick
go out
apples or
somewhere.
yeah, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
And now yeah, there's just a lot. Um, you're just less free with your
Flexible.
right.
time, I guess. Yeah.
Simultaneously though, right? Like it's not just that I'm giving things up. Like I have received so much in return, and not just insofar as if not just that I'm more mature, which is true, right? But I have learned so much about God the Father's love by
Mm.
becoming a father. And it is because when my son hands me a yellow pom pom, and it's like, this is for you.
Yeah, and you're
I am overjoyed by that gift.
right.
For
It's
like
worthless in and of itself, but the fact that it was
absolutely.
given by the one that you love is all that matters. And
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? And so it's like that is something that I genuinely did not understand, right? So like when when I come to God the Father and I've just committed an awful sin, and I offer him my repentance. He really is overjoyed by my repentance. You know what I mean? Like, and that's something that I learned only because and like has not done something like under 2, so he hasn't sinned yet. But my point is that if I'm overjoyed by this pom pom, I imagine that I want to say that I'll be even more overjoyed by him turning toward the good, in a very real way.
absolutely,
Um,
absolutely, yeah.
and so like I've gotten insights into my own spiritual life and into the Christian spiritual life because I became a dad. And
I think it
because I
definitely
was
helps
willing to
us.
pour myself out like that.
It definitely helps us to understand that God's love comes before our love for Him, and
Mm,
I think that's actually something a lot of Catholics struggle with. That independent of whether or not we've done anything for God, His love for us is still primary. He loved us first, and yeah, I would say until I saw my sister and having her first children, she now has four under seven, and just seeing how these children have not done anything that's usually considered love. They're
right.
sitting there
Mhm.
pooping and eating and
Yeah.
making messes, and that's it. And yet, nevertheless, the love is there, and that's it doesn't help you understand that God doesn't love us because we're good. He loves us because we're His.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's beautiful.
Is there something that you think like have you noticed anything that discourages young people from the pastor's point of view, right? From one, getting married, and then two, being willing to embrace children.
Well, yeah, a couple of things. First of all, is in growing up in a small family. If some people do, two siblings or
Mm,
something, a lot of times they don't learn that selflessness that
mm,
becomes
Mhm.
second nature when you have kids.
Mhm.
And so if your life from the time you were born really does revolve around you, and most parents nowadays kind of do make their life revolve around their kid,
mm,
oh, little Johnny
Mhm.
wants to do this or that, and not really think about kind of a broader picture of, well, Johnny actually has to sacrifice this for the greater good of the family. So
yeah.
so
Right.
if you grow up in that manner, then you're not going to want to have kids.
Mm,
Right.
And it's kind of amazed me. I've actually asked several kids who are only children, and I've said, did you wish you had a sibling? And they're like, no, not really. I get everything I want.
right.
Huh.
I was like, how
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
sad that is, right? Because it's true. Yeah, you do get everything you want, but you're missing out on some relationships that would last you forever because your parents aren't going to be around forever. And hopefully, being a son or daughters or being a sibling that's gonna be a relationship to last. So that's part
Mm,
of it. It's just growing up in a small family and having everything given to you makes you less likely to want to have a big family yourself.
mm,
Yeah.
But I think as Americans, we have this idea that our birthright is fundamentally hedonism, that we have every right to have as much pleasure as humanly possible
mm,
without any cost to it. That's just
Right.
our American mentality.
yeah.
Right.
So, and I see that, this is a crazy small thing, but we're recording this at the time period when eggs are about $10 a dozen,
Hmm.
Yep.
outrageous, right? And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and a lot of people look at that and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe eggs are $10, a dozen. How in the world am I going to survive? Well, you're going to survive by eating other food. Like, don't buy eggs. Right. But there's this view that like, I should have everything I want affordable right there at my fingertips at every moment.
Hmm.
And having a kid completely throws that upside down because you can't have
Yeah.
everything you want. You're like, no, this is my time to read. No, the kid's crying in the crib. You need to get up and take care of your kid, right?
Right.
So it's that
Yeah.
that mentality shift of just getting out of hedonism, which is really hard for Americans to do,
Hmm.
and anybody in Western culture.
There's a I'm gonna go on a little uh
Rant?
anecdotal sidetrack.
Oh, okay. I was hoping for a rant, but all right, we'll take that too.
But there's right, Jordan Peterson had, is it 10 rules for life or 12 rules for life? I think it's 10, but I don't remember.
Sounds
Um,
good. Sounds about right. I don't know.
and one of those rules is clean your room.
Mm,
Um, and it's funny because actually the rule is like clean your room before you criticize the world.
hmm.
And at first I kind of just like I took that as very surface level as if you don't clean your room you have no right. If you can't keep your world together you have no right to criticize the world. And maybe to an extent that's it, but like kind of in an exterior fashion. But at the core of it is this idea that um cleaning your room is doing the right thing, right? Like you're making sure that your life is in order before you go out and you criticize the world. And so if you really read through the chapter, you'll find that cleaning your room, making sure everything is order, preventing suffering that you could have prevented,
Mm.
um, is actually just listen to your conscience. Like that's kind of where he's going. Um,
And connected with that, if I can interrupt for a
yeah,
second, is
please.
another big reason why I've heard and read that people are not having kids is because they're despairing of the state of the world.
Right.
whether it's the physical world with climate change and this and that, and people are like, oh, it's irresponsible to bring another, resource sucking individual into the world, or
Right.
it's, just the
What a
world is
wonderful way to think about your future child.
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So, oh, it's going to eat, take too much carbon. Oh, no. But,
Right.
but I think the very fundamental nature of a child is hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because to have a child implies that we believe the human race is worth keeping going, that this world is
Mm-hmm.
worth saving, and that this child can have the potential to actually make a positive impact on this world and not a negative one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I find it so sad that so many people look on having children with such a negative light, because it truly, I mean, all of my friends, we were like earlier on in our friend group for getting married, um but all of my friends who have gotten married since, or are getting married, I just tell them, like, don't wait to have kids, because they're the greatest gift in the entire universe.
Yeah.
And
They're so much greater than your Saturday morning Pilates class.
yeah, like, things that you think you care about now, like, yeah, like working out, or
Yeah.
going on vacations, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
like, they will bless you more than those things will. Like, they will bring you more joy.
With your friend group, did you have any pressure or people asking you like, why aren't you waiting for a couple of years so you can enjoy your marriage? And
I mean, I think people were like, whoa, that was fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so we was conceived
A month.
5 weeks
A
into
month
being
after,
married,
yeah.
us being married. He's not married yet. And
however, we're setting him up with that little girl next door. But no.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. He's got at least 4 options from the local church moms group,
Right.
but yeah, I don't know about. I mean, I think that we were fairly vocal about the fact that we've always wanted a bigger family, and that's definitely because we embraced that aspect of Catholicism. Like, we feel encouraged by our church and our faith to embrace a larger family, and we think that it would be good. Period.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I definitely was given the advice by family members of, like, wait and get your job taken care of, save up money for a house, like, do this, do that. And then people found out we were pregnant 5 weeks in, and they were like, you are terrible at listening to advice. and I was like, yeah, I had no intention of listening to it,
That's bad
But
advice.
I do think it was tempting to wait a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because especially living here in Connecticut, where it's so expensive, you're like, okay, if we could wait a year, save some money, whatever, just get our feet under us as a married couple, then, we'll be more prepared in the future to have children. But like, it doesn't really work that way.
You never get to the point where everything's set. And that's
Right,
an important
right.
thing, because I do think a lot of people wait because they're like, oh, I just need to get this, I just need to get that. But there's an
Right.
old Russian proverb that I really like that says, every child is born with a loaf of bread under his arm.
Mm.
With the idea that, like, if you really just truly trust in God, then he's going to truly provide for both material and spiritual needs of your family. And it boggles my mind, that, people with 2 kids or 3 kids are like, well, financially we can't handle another one. I bet you could. It may mean making a sacrifice, but like this idea of living in 21st century America and saying, oh, I can't handle another kid because I already have 2. You're like, well, that's not really trust. Because trust is saying, God, you decide my family size, not me.
Yeah. And you know what? That's so, like, I know that this is I'm going to boast of my weakness. Ranae is the one who righted the ship here for me. I remember, after I was born, and I actually basically said to Ranae, like, actually, and it was because we're involved in so many ministries, right? So, like, somehow it got twisted. The goods were put out of order, where I was like, should we actually wait to have another kid because we're involved in all these ministries and so much goods getting, we think is coming from this. And if we have another child, like, we're definitely going to have to move,
or take a step back,
right? Or take a step back or whatever, And Renee was the one who said to me, like as a family, what's your primary ministry? Right? Your primary ministry is helping each other get to heaven as spouses, and helping your children get to heaven. And like no amount of worship nights, you know,
Yeah.
like topple that in the hierarchy.
Well, that's important because, a lot of people point to the different encyclicals, Humanae Vitae or Familiaris
Mhm,
Consortio, but actually way back in the early 1900s, there was an encyclical called Casti Connubii, which speaks
mhm,
about marriage. And it's very beautiful. And it makes an interesting point that we don't talk about a lot because there's a primary and a secondary end to marriage. And you mentioned the two ends, right?
mhm,
But the primary end is actually not the sanctification of your spouse. The primary end is the procreation, education of children. And the
mhm,
reason why that's the primary end is because marriage is the only place that that can happen.
mm.
Mhm.
Renee can be sanctified through 1,000 different things, right? No offense, but she doesn't need you, Matt.
Right.
She can pray on her own. She can have other Christian community. She can have other
Right.
women calling on her holiness, parents, whatever, whatever. But there's only
Mhm,
one place in which the procreation and education of children will take place, and that is marriage. So that's the primary end of marriage. So to
mhm.
say, I want to do another good over this primary end, you're right, would be to flip that upside down. And
So why do you think that that's gotten flipped? You know what I mean? Because I've heard you say this before about Cassie Kanubi, but there's definitely that idea of that. So here's my question for clarification. Um, I hear often people say things like chastity speakers say things like, "Well, you have to love your wife or husband, whichever, first, right? And then that kind of trickles down to the kids." But here with Casta Kanubi, but the primary end is the procreation and education of children. And to me, there seems to be something true about both of those,
mhm.
right? So how do I mix those two things together?
um, I think one's more looking at it from an objective standpoint, and one's more subjective standpoint.
Right,
Subjectively, it is true that the best way you can love your children is by loving your spouse and loving them
right,
well.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But
right,
the best way to love your spouse is to fulfill the proper end of marriage with your
Mhm.
spouse.
Mhm.
right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, and not
Yeah.
subject that to another. So, yeah, it's a both and true.
Right, right.
And
Which
I'm
is
not saying,
classic.
yeah,
Of course, it's a both end. I don't even know why I asked.
but yeah, I mean, getting your spouse to heaven, it can happen in many other ways other than marriage, but marriage
Right.
is primarily for kids. And pardon my soapbox. I'm going to go off on a tangent here now and soapbox
That's
a little
okay.
bit.
That's okay.
But you know, when St. John Bosco worked with young people for his entire life, he said that 1 in 10 are called to a religious or priestly vocation.
Mm.
And that sounds like ridiculous, right? I mean, imagine a
Yeah.
parish of 2,000 people where
Right. Yeah.
200 of them are called to some sort of consecrated life to God. And I truly, truly believe that the reason why we have so many lay people working in the church is simply because a lot of men and women are not willing to step up to their vocation of celibacy for the sake of the kingdom.
Mm,
Mm.
Things like worship nights, things like talks, things like professional
Mhm.
Catholic speakers should be
mhm,
men and women that don't have to be torn between taking care of 5 kids or having 5 kids and spreading the
mhm,
gospel. There should not be that tearing of one's heart. And that's
mhm,
what celibacy allows a person to do is have that undivided heart for the
mhm,
gospel, for Jesus Christ. Because I don't know how I would be married as a priest. I mean, and to raise 5 kids, like that's ridiculous. I am eating at people's houses 2, 3 times a week.
mhm,
I'm having meetings every single night. Like I would never be around for my
Right.
kid's sports game, and it would be unfair of them to
mhm,
be for me to give them the short shrift. And so I really think that more people need to be generous in saying, yeah, I really want to live a life of celibacy. And maybe it's not priesthood, maybe it is actually just a consecrated celibate in the world who
mhm,
feels called to work as a DRE, who feels called to lead worship nights so that they can have that radical availability. Not to
mhm.
denigrate the good work that married couples are doing in those lines, but
Yeah, I
you
don't think it does.
you're
No.
experiencing that torn heart, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
Father, you've experienced me experiencing that torn heart.
Yeah. Yes.
because because usually we record Restless at like 7 p.m. and
Yeah.
I've said it at least 2 or 3 times of where like, I don't get to be home when Michael goes to sleep tonight,
Yeah.
or Renee has to put Michael to sleep by herself tonight, Like I can't be there to help out and just do the dishes while she does that.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But
You
it's
know?
hard, but it is hard because, you see the fruit coming from
Yeah.
these ministries, and that's such a blessing to be a part of as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So it is difficult.
It
And
is
there is
challenging.
something to
Absolutely.
missioning with your children, I think.
Yes, and that can be really beautiful. One of our heart-to-heart nights, we had this family from Long Island
Mhm.
come. I don't know if you
Yes.
were there for that one. One of the
Yes,
we have
yes,
Yeah.
we were.
heart-to-heart adoration is a beautiful adoration we do at our parish, which Matt and Renee are actually going to be playing this coming Saturday
Mhm.
at our
Okay.
heart-to-heart. Not when you're listening.
Yeah,
Saturday after
yeah,
we're
it's
recording.
gonna
So
be
don't
later.
don't show up at my parish like whenever shows up. But yeah, so they're coming to play, and it's really beautiful. But they had this whole family come up from Long Island whose ministry is music, and so like the 14-year-old boy played guitar, and the
Mhm.
younger kids sang, and so yeah, you can definitely do ministry as a family, and I hope, God willing, be gifted with the same musical talent that you guys have.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I think he's on his way.
He's very advanced.
Yeah. We're not
Good.
biased.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah.
No, of course not. No.
But yeah, so I mean, I think that there is something to missioning together as a family, even if it's a short-term mission, going on a mission trip together. But regardless, it's clear to me that no, like the primary mission of a husband and father and wife and mother is to their kids. It's to the family.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes your mission too, especially with the witness you have, is to the other moms and dads.
Right.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, Renee, are you involved in like a mom's group?
Yeah. I am. Which is nice. It's nice. It's because I feel like we all kind of get to witness to one another.
Yeah.
Which is really helpful sometimes for encouragement and,
I'm sure
yeah.
some of the moms are at their, are stressed out or, worried about this or that. And you can be such a powerful witness to them and vice versa
And
when you
vice
feel that
versa.
way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and we pray for one another, and it like, we have a group text now that we can kind of do meal trains and different things like that, and just support one another.
That's wonderful.
Which is really helpful. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Have
definitely
you
encourage
have you
that.
found in your own life, do you feel more stress after having a child, more anxiety?
Yeah, I would say yes, but not. I think yes, because you just care so much about your child that
Yeah.
it's easy to worry.
Yeah.
It's just easy to have those worries. But on the flip side of that, I would say I've learned to walk by faith more,
Yeah.
like,
Mm,
because you just have to, because there are things that are out of your control,
Right.
and you just have to offer it up to the Lord, and trust that he's going to take care of you, and he's going to take care of your child, because
Yeah.
he loves you and he is good.
I've to build on that. I've had this experience recently where I realized that as my love has increased, that is love for my like the active love that I make on a regular basis for Renee and for my loathing of evil things has also increased. And what
mm,
I mean by that is like as a young person, and perhaps this is just because when you're a teenager you think you'll never die,
mm.
um but like I have definitely experienced and then had to work through a greater fear of someone getting injured or dying,
Sure.
um and that has forced me to depend upon divine providence. um
Well, it's scary, but a necessary reality to realize that these children aren't ours. They're God's,
exactly
Yeah.
right? And
exactly
Yeah.
so it's kind of like that's hard because your heart is like walking around outside your body, in
Yes.
these children, but
Yes.
they're not ours. They're on loan.
And just having the faith to offer your children to God, and just saying, like, I trust you with this child.
Hmm.
It's hard, but it's
And trusting that
the
he's gonna
only way to manage it,
yeah
really.
that he's gonna give us the grace to parent,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
Mm,
and even more specifically, he will give Renee the grace to mother, and me the grace to father, and me the grace to lead, like especially when it comes to like I don't know, certain decisions, right? Like I really do make certain decisions as the leader of our family. And I have to just absolutely trust that I'm going to be given that grace,
Hmm.
you know? And if I make a mistake, I have to trust that she's going to be given the grace to, uh
Call you on it.
To call you out. Yeah, exactly. Sure. That's how it works together.
but seriously, like
Exactly.
in an individual sense, and the grace to raise these kids.
Hmm.
You said that the other day.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a conversation with some homeschooling moms because that's something that we've been considering recently. We have time, but
Yeah.
something that we've been talking about.
He's not even two.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. um, but just they were encouraging us, like younger moms, to remember that God gave us these particular children to raise and educate,
Yeah.
and so we have to just trust that we will be given the grace to do that,
Mhm.
and we are the right person to do that.
That's really important because family life is not one size fits all.
Right.
No.
And that's important because I bet you probably feel maybe some pressure. Maybe you look at other people either on social media or in real life and you're like, oh, why are they doing so much better than me? Like
Mhm.
why can't my
Yeah.
family look like their family? And
Right.
I
Mhm.
think
Right.
parents go
Your
through
house is
that
so much
pressure.
cleaner.
Yeah, exactly. My house is so much cleaner, but
Yeah.
that's it's not a competition, and that
Right.
God has made each child unique and each parent unique and
Mhm.
specifically
Hmm.
given them to each other for their own growth and virtue. That's an important thing to remember.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. The other thing that I was thinking that I wanted to say a little bit earlier was, as far as I think you can connect a lack of dependence and trust in divine providence with the decision to not have children,
Mm.
because we live in a world, especially in the West, I think, that like we have seemingly like an untapped amount of access to knowing where people are,
Mm,
and
control.
taking care of people from afar,
Yeah.
and it's like, I'm not suggesting that those things are bad, like it's like there's a good in, I guess, being able to hit find my iPhone, and knowing where it is and knowing where your loved ones are and whatever, but with that there comes a lack of a lack of trust and a lack of dependency. And I recently switched over to a phone that doesn't have those features, and that's why those two examples have come to mind. Where it's like,
Mm.
if there's a certain amount of nervousness, it's like, well, you know what, Lord, I trust you to take care of my family.
Well, I
Like,
think that's the dichotomy, right? Is that there's kind of two visions of the world. One is that of control, one is that of gift,
mm-hmm,
right? And in today's world, the control is everything. And recently President Trump came out and said, like, we need to expand access to IVF, in vitro fertilization. A
mm-hmm,
lot of Catholics that I've talked to say, well, if the church is pro-life, why are we against IVF? It's creating more human
mm-hmm,
beings, because the reason is because it's a matter of control rather than gift.
mm-hmm,
Saying I want to control my body, the gift of human life, instead of receiving a child as a gift. And that's a critical mind shift. But we live in such a technological world where everything is literally under our control. There's nothing we can't control. So
mm-hmm,
many people are like, well, I'm going to control even my family size and when the child comes, instead of just saying, Lord, I'm open to whatever gift you want to give me.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
challenging, but it's a scary, frightening, but also freeing reality to turn over one's control to God.
Yeah, and I think that, so I really like that, and that idea of reception. Um, And I think that I'm curious, have you experienced like a shift in your mindset towards reception as opposed to
Like, I got to
control?
make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think so because there's, like I was saying, well, like I was saying before, it's like you literally cannot control certain things. You know what I like? You can't control whether we couldn't control whether this baby was going to be
Yeah.
a boy or girl or whatever, or even just the health of the baby. Like there are just so many things that you can't control, and
Yeah.
you just have to trust that you know God is going to give you what he wants to give you, and
Yeah.
it is a
Right.
gift,
Yeah.
whether it's
Especially the,
whether this baby is perfectly healthy or has something,
Yeah.
or if there's something wrong or whatever. Like it's still the life of this child is still a gift.
and you'll see
Yeah.
that when they become teenagers and start acting
Totally.
out, and you're like, why isn't this kid, acting perfect? Well,
Right.
nevertheless, it's
It's
still a gift.
Yeah.
it's funny
Yeah.
because like that question I asked you, I ended up just thinking about a little bit, and um, there's a very tangible.
Oh, we hear background.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that might be the end bell right there.
That's the sign there.
Yeah,
He's probably gonna go back to sleep. But
yeah.
I'll...
But the the thing that stands out to me was, I definitely thought that I thought it was gonna be a girl. You know?
Really?
Yeah, I did, and like I didn't know. You know what I mean? I didn't know
Just had a
anything.
hunch.
Yeah, yeah. And in hindsight, having a son was exactly what I needed for my personal growth. Because by having a son, like I really was challenged to embrace fatherhood in a way that would be I'm mirroring what it means to be a good man to a son,
Hmm.
you know? And it's like, how far into that am I? Well, I guess not all that far, you know?
Yeah.
But it like immediately put me on track to like this is where I'm headed.
Mhm.
No, but and you see it already. Like he copies you in
Yeah.
a different way than he copies me. Like
Yeah.
when just random things, you know, like he looks up to me obviously to learn how to do things, but still
Yeah.
like it is different. You can tell that he's like really trying to emulate things that you do
Right.
more than
Yeah.
me.
So,
But again, God gives you the grace to do what you're called to do,
Right.
because by human standards, like, gosh, you know, I have to be like the perfect witness. What if I mess up? You know, what if what if I give a bad example to my
Right.
kid?
Right.
and that's the
Well,
thing.
and then
That
being...
was the grace. You know what I mean?
Well,
Mhm.
and then having the humility and the, you know,
Yeah.
and the courage to then own up to those mistakes or apologize, like
Right.
apologize to your children if you need to, or, you
Mhm.
know, I think that's something that we've learned is like, it's okay to be imperfect because nobody is perfect, but
Yeah.
then just showing how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're not the Holy Family, but we're striving to be,
Right.
and that's
Right.
it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
well, thank you both, Renee and Matt, for joining us on this episode of Restless. To all of our listeners, especially those who are in the process of dating or getting married or newly married, I want to encourage you to truly trust God with your family size and do not be afraid to pursue that great good, costly good, but great good of children in your life. You know, I pray that God makes you very fruitful, for that was indeed his first commandment: be fruitful and multiply, because God loves life. He loves souls, and he wants us to cooperate with him in bringing new souls into existence and then in raising them to know and love him, as Matt and Renee are doing so well. So thank you both for being great parents. So far, a year and a half in, keep going. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM, 103.9 FM, and wherever you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube. Follow us on social media at Veritas Catholic. Just Veritas Catholic social media
Yeah.
handles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, find us on all the cool media stuff. So anyway, signing off. Join us all next time on Restless. God bless.